Modern men seem to spend more effort deciding on a suit or a car than they do in choosing a wife. And the consequences are clear. More marriages are ending in divorce, and the children caught in the middle often grow up to be unhappy. I can't recall where I first heard this sentiment, but it rings completely true. Today, one of the leading causes of divorce is infidelity. Male infidelity is widely condemned, especially by women, and is typically understood as, "I wasn't getting enough." But female infidelity is often judged with more leniency, especially among women themselves. So what compels a woman to stray? Many justifications are common. My husband is a tyrant. He doesn't see me as a woman. He doesn't love me. He doesn't satisfy me, and so forth. Fundamentally, it often comes down to a lack of love, or perhaps the loss of that thrill, the butterflies in the stomach. When a woman chooses to be unfaithful, it's usually an emotional decision. She's driven purely by her feelings, with little thought to the consequences. And, in my view, female infidelity has a much deeper impact than male infidelity. A woman's betrayal can dismantle everything: her family, the spirits of her children, her husband, her parents, and most tragically, her own self. And affairs share one universal truth. Sooner or later, the truth surfaces. Most affairs end on the same note. It's incredibly rare to build lasting happiness on the ruins of a relationship that's been shattered. Forging a new happiness is nearly impossible, and after a while, the second chapter of betrayal begins. The attempt to return to the family. "You're the only one I love. I made a terrible mistake. I can't live without you or the kids." The outcomes vary. Some people take back their straying spouse, while others refuse. But regardless of the resolution, the family will never truly be happy again. I married my first love at the age of 20. She was my age, and I couldn't imagine anything other than smooth sailing for our future together. Our relationship was a classic love story. We met at a friend's birthday party, dated for nearly a year, and then tied the knot. She was my first and only love, and I was completely smitten, as the saying goes. When my parents voiced doubts about our marriage, I was determined to move forward regardless, even if it meant leaving home to be with her. In the end, we got married, and soon we had a son, followed by a daughter a few years later. Harper, my wife, was someone I truly adored, and my love only grew over the years. She gave me no reason to suspect her, and I trusted her implicitly without undermining her with jealousy. Like every couple, we had disagreements, but they never devolved into screaming matches. We always managed to find common ground and make peace. That's how we lived for 17 years, until everything took a turn for the worse. Harper's behavior changed sharply. She grew irritable and started picking fights out of thin air. She transformed her appearance, dyed her hair black, even though she knew I didn't care for the look, bought a new wardrobe, and tried new perfumes. She began staying late at work with flimsy excuses. Our intimate life faded to nothing. There was no way these changes were just random. I thought back and realized that her shift began after she attended a reunion. Something must have happened at that gathering that left her so profoundly altered. I knew a few of Harper's old classmates, so I decided to carefully ask them about that reunion. Through them, I learned some surprising things about my wife. Apparently, back in the 10th grade, Harper had been deeply in love with a boy named Carter. He was popular, good-looking, and well-liked by their classmates. After school, life took them in different directions. He moved away to study, married the daughter of a factory director, and even started a family. Harper had grief for him, but eventually she met and married me. For years, they lived separate lives in different cities until Carter was relocated to ours, and they met again at that ill-fated reunion. Seeing each other sparked their old feelings to life. In all honesty, it was a fairly typical situation, one that happens all too often. From that night on, they were together. They spent that very evening together, and one meeting led to another. Harper found every excuse to be with him, inventing cover stories that could make a spy jealous. I learned Carter's last name, his address, and could have easily exposed them. But by then, I was overwhelmed with disgust. My love for Harper had soured into something unpleasant. Knowing another man was in her life left me with no hope of a future with her. Yet, before deciding on the fate of our marriage, I wanted to give her the chance to explain. So I confronted her about the affair. In response, she launched into an emotional tirade, blaming me for every misstep in her life, especially the wreck she claimed her life had become. At the heart of her anger was the claim that I'd not only ruined her life, but now had the nerve to question her honesty. Oh, the betrayals we don't see coming. A few days later, one evening, when Harper was supposedly working late again, I decided to go to Carter's address. He opened the door himself, and when I asked, "Where's Harper?" he nodded towards the kitchen. There she was sitting on a stool, her leg tucked under her, with a cigarette in her hand. Noticing me, she stiffened slightly, and then bitterly said, "Why did you come?" "I love him," as if it didn't require introductions. I already understood this, but once again I tried to reason with her by reminding her about the children. She coldly replied that the children would stay with her and her new partner. "Let them stay with you until they get used to everything," she said dismissively. I had nothing left to say. I told her that I'd no longer discuss this, that I would file for divorce myself. She turned away, looking out the window, signaling that our conversation was over. I left silently, stepped down the stairs, pushed open the building's door, and walked out into the rain. I remember that night well. The last night I was married to Harper. The rain fell steadily as I turned up my collar and walked alone through the wet streets. My heart and soul felt like they were in turmoil. Should I have fought harder for my wife? Should I have tried to win her back? But deep down, I sensed that it would all be in vain. She wouldn't return to me. The sight of her empty, indifferent eyes, so devoid of warmth, like those of a stranger, haunted me. I felt an unbearable wave of sickness wash over me, and I bit down on the sleeve of my coat to stifle a cry of despair. When I got home, I told the kids that their mother was away on a long business trip. I couldn't bring myself to share the painful truth, even though I knew the day would come when I would have to. My son, with an innocence that cut deep, asked, "Is Mom with another husband?" I nodded. He wrapped his arms around me, and we sat like that until midnight. The following day, I filed for divorce. 2 months passed, and the legal process dragged on. They gave us time to reconcile, but the kids stayed with me, while Harper didn't seem in any rush to bring a new father figure into their lives. Then came the classic turn of events. One evening, my ex-wife showed up at my door. She told me she had left Carter. She insisted that she had never truly loved anyone but me. "I'm so sorry. I'm worthless. Do whatever you want with me. Just don't push me away," she pleaded. I listened in silence as she lamented, but I explained that the husband she once knew had died that night in her lover's apartment. I also told her I wouldn't stop her from seeing the children, but I would never live with her again. Her eyes, filled with tears, held a mixture of pain, regret, and the remnants of our past love. It took every ounce of strength I had to remain composed as she left. That evening, overwhelmed by her emotions, she swallowed a handful of pills in a suicide attempt. Thankfully, a neighbor found her and called for help. She was saved, and her parents took her home from the hospital. Harper called several times, begging for my forgiveness. My mother even came to my office, trying to convince me to reconcile with her. But my resolve remained firm, even though the ache in my heart was indescribable. I still loved her, and I understood that I could never feel that way about anyone else again. Now Harper lives with her parents, regularly visiting the kids, hoping to rebuild some semblance of a relationship with me. She clings to the hope that I might forgive her, that we could find our way back together. Perhaps I could have found it in my heart to forgive, if I didn't love her so profoundly.